Tom?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, you might caution people to mute themselves when they're not speaking.
Good point.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Rachel, do we have any idea how many we're expecting? Or should we wait a minute or two for folks to jump on?
We usually wait maybe a couple minutes. And then if people roll in late, that's okay too.
Okay.
Rachel, if you could let us know when we hit quorum, and that would be probably an indicator we can get rolling soon thereafter.
We have quorum.
Okay. Do you know how many off the steering committee we have total?
Let's see here. Give me 1 second.
Sure.
We also have 2 joined by phone, which may or may not be committee members.
I'm showing that we have at least 7 committee members.
Okay. We'll start in 1 more minute. Okay, why don't we get started? Hopefully everybody can hear me. Rachel, are we okay to go?
Yes, sir.
Very good. All right, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Tom Griever. I'm the chair of the Kansas City Climate Protection Steering Committee. Welcome to the meeting today. We've got a somewhat packed agenda. It looks light on paper, but we'll have a lot to talk about. And a couple just housekeeping items before we start. Number one, this proceeding is a public meeting and it is being recorded. So it's important that everybody please put their systems or their phones on mute so that we can get a clear recording and so we don't have any feedback or echoes or anything like that. And what I'd like to do to start, we have a couple folks on the committee, including myself, who have been on for a few years, but largely this is a very new committee. And we also have the city's consultant, the Brendel Group, on the phone as well, or on the Teams call to present. So at the beginning, I think it'd be worthwhile for all of us to introduce ourselves to each other. Those of us on the committee haven't even had a chance to meet each other yet in many instances. So it's exciting to be here. Unfortunately, we have to do this by Teams again, by computer. We were hoping to meet in person at this point, and maybe we can meet in person the next time we get together. But it's good to see all of you here and at least on screen today. And why don't we, Rachel, if we're okay, I think we've got a few people rolling in now, but we'll just go ahead with the agenda. Again, my name's Tom Griever. I am, I'll start the introductions with myself and then kind of roll down the list of steering committee members, and we can take a few minutes for each one to introduce themselves and talk about who they represent or what their interest is in the committee, and I'll give a little bit of background. For myself, I am an attorney here in Kansas City. I've been practicing environmental law for about 28 years. I've been a Kansas City resident for about 20 years. And I practice at the Shook Hardy Law Firm. I represent regulated entities on environmental compliance matters. And I specifically specialize in Clean Air Act requirements and developments and regulations. So that's my specialty area. That's a lot of what's kept me interested in climate change developments. And I was appointed to this committee by Mayor James, I think it was about 6 years ago. Kristen might correct me on that because she and I joined at the same time. I'm guessing 6 years. It's, but it's been a thrill and an honor to be on the committee and to help the city guide its way through the changes. And obviously we've got a lot of work cut out ahead of us over the next few years too, and especially over the next few months as we put our new plan together. So it's good to meet you all. I look forward to meeting you all in person sometime soon. And with that, I'll just go down the list of steering committee members. I can't tell who is all on the phone, so I'll just read names. And if I call your name and you're on, if you could just go ahead and give a brief introduction. I'll start with Angela Crawford. Is Angela on?
Yes, that's me. Yes, so I'm Angela Crawford. I'm a marketer in Kansas City, currently work for the Builders Association, which is a commercial construction trade association, regional trade association, part of the National Association of General Contractors as well. And while certainly commercial construction has a role to play in environmentalism, my role on this committee is probably coming more from a place of personal interest. I have been interested in environmentalism as long as I can remember, and have been interested in getting involved in a more strategic way beyond just what I can do on a personal level. And so reached out about joining this committee and was appointed.
Great. Thanks, Angela. Beth Pauley. Beth, are you on?
Hi, everyone. Yes, I am on. My name is Beth Pauley. I am a kind of 10-year-long nonprofit advocate, grassroots organizer, I've lived in Kansas City, Missouri for about 15 years. I have been involved in environmental policy for just about 4 years. I currently work for Climate and Energy Project, and my subject area of knowledge and expertise is energy generation. But if I were to be more specific, I would say my bread and butter is equitable energy policy and energy justice to ensure that folks who are most disproportionately impacted by energy issues are the first who have access to the clean energy issues that we are talking about.
Very good. Thank you, Beth. Nice to meet you. Ellen Fairchild. Ellen, are you on?
I am. Hello, everybody. I'm Vice President and Chief Compliance Officer at Evergy. I lead, obviously, our compliance efforts, and that includes environmental compliance, and I also lead our ESG efforts, our sustainability efforts as a company. So thank you. Glad to be on the team.
Great. Thanks, Ellen. Bill Griffith. Is Bill on?
Hi, this is Bill Griffith. I'm a retired teacher. I've lived in Kansas City, Missouri for the last 6 years. Before that, I was on the other side of the river there. I've been involved as a volunteer in environmental work in different ways since 1993, and probably since 99 to 2000, renewable energy efficiency, and interactions with utilities, rural electric co-ops on different aspects of their business and how it applies to clean air. And then I have various backgrounds as officers and in the Sierra Club as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. Bridget Sanderson, are you with us?
I am. I'm here. Yeah, so my name is Bridget Sanderson. I have been a lifelong Kansas Cityan, but bouncing back and forth between the Missouri and Kansas side. There was a short stint in California, but I don't really count it. I am one of the newer members. I currently work for Environment Missouri, which is a statewide citizen-based environmental advocacy group, and based out of Kansas City, of course. Prior to that, I actually worked as a soil scientist for the state of Kansas for about 8 years. So a lot of my knowledge comes from conservation efforts, but again, it runs the gambit of, energy justice and conservation and protecting clean water and air and everything. So I'm excited to be a part of the team.
Very good. Nice to see you. Thank you. Kristen, one of the old timers like me, right?
Yes. Really want to welcome all the new members to the committee. And I'm in a Brookside coffee shop because I don't have electricity right now at home. So I'm not going to stay on for very long, but just to say I have served as executive director of Bridging the Gap for 11 years and have been there 14. We do a lot of different work related to the climate, to climate change preparation and remediation, a lot in urban forestry, energy and water efficiency, and so forth. So with that, I'll just, it's just so loud in here. I may have to move somewhere else. Thanks, Tom.
Thanks, Kristen. Good luck. Justin Reyes, is Justin on? Justin, going once? Okay, how about Michael Kelly? Is Michael with us? Michael's not here, sounds like.
He is. He's on mute.
Sorry. I had to get my charger. Michael Kelly, I am the policy director for Bike Walk KC, and I apologize for being late. I was actually having a discussion about expanding bike share in Raytown. So happy to be here.
Great. Thanks, Michael. Good to see you. And Robin Ganal, last but not least.
Hi, my name's Robin Ganal. I was born in Kansas City, went to KU, but then I spent the last couple decades moving back and forth between both coasts, but I moved back about 2 years ago. My background includes serving as environmental engineer back in the day for Burns and McDonnell, an IT project manager and analyst for Department of Treasury, and also I've been a community organizer for a nonprofit in California called Climate Action Campaign, where I spent several years advocating for clean energy and community choice energy. But here I'm co-founder and representing the Kansas City chapter of a nonprofit called Mothers Out Front, mobilizing for a livable climate. It's a national nonprofit that empowers moms to engage at the local level on issues that impact climate. So I'm honored to be here to be a voice for kids and for concerned moms who are really counting on city leaders to use all levers of power they have to achieve a swift, just transition to clean energy, and especially in light of yesterday's IPCC report, so that they might have a chance of a healthy future. But happy to be here.
Great. Thank you, Robin. Good to see you. And thank you again to everybody that is here today on the committee, and for the new members, welcome. It's great to have you aboard. Andy, do you want to introduce yourself and your team really quickly?
Sure. Thank you, Tom. Andy Savstein, I'm the Chief Environmental Officer for Kansas City and the Office of Environmental Quality, which is a division of the City Manager's Office. And on behalf of the city, I want to welcome the Climate Protection Steering Committee members. Happy to have you on board. And of course, this is opportune time, and we're just ready to get started diving into our planning process. And it's a great time to have you on board for that. So being that we have a large agenda, I don't want to spend a lot of time, but I'm going to turn it over to Laura Ish, who'll be the next person, our Sustainability Manager.
Good afternoon, everyone. Laura Ish. I'm going to talk a little bit more as the presentation starts, but I am the sustainability manager. So my side of the office consists of right now the climate planning process, all things sustainability, and then our energy empowerment ordinance. And I have two staff on my team. One is Chris Hayes, who couldn't be with us today. He's got something else going on. And the other is Jerry Schechter, who is on. So I'll turn it over to Jerry real quick.
Thanks, Laura. Welcome, everyone. My name is Jerry Schechter. I'm Sustainability Coordinator in the Office of Environmental Quality. I report to Laura. And as Laura said, I would reiterate my job is all things sustainability. So welcome to all the new steering committee members and the general public guests as well. Thank you for being here.
Jerry, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I think you would be considered the institutional knowledge of the group, wouldn't you, from the outset?
In some ways. I've been in this job for 15 years. I've been involved in energy efficiency and renewable energy to some extent since 1976.
Great. Well, we're lucky to have you with us still. Thank you. So moving into the business, we want to quickly look at the May 21 meeting minutes. The last time we met was back on May 24th, and the minutes were circulated prior to the meeting. They should have all been on your calendar notice. Are there any comments or changes or questions about the meeting minutes? Or if not, I'd be happy to entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
And Tom, before you do that, just to give a quick shout out to my admin, Rachel, Rachel O'Neill. She's our admin support, and she'll be very integral to helping you folks out with any of your specific needs on minutes or videos or whatever it comes out. Feel free to reach out to Rachel. Rachel, did you want to say anything real quick before they move forward?
Nice to meet you all. Please feel free to reach out to me at any time with any questions or anything that you need at all.
Thank you, Rachel.
Sorry about that, Rachel. Didn't mean to walk right past you there. Pardon me.
Tom?
Yes.
This is Jerry again. I just want to make one quick comment that wasn't mentioned earlier. Michael Kelly is also on the Environmental Management Commission, and he is your liaison to that commission.
Very good. Thank you.
Bill Griffith has his hand up. Tom?
I can't even see that on my screen. So yes, Bill.
Yeah, Tom, I just wanted to make a motion to approve the May 2021 meeting minutes.
Very good. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Kristen, do you have anything?
I was just trying to second.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I know it's a little awkward on the video. Appreciate that. We have a motion and a second. All in favor of approving the May 24th meeting minutes? Either raise your hand or say aye.
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 Any opposition? Okay, the meeting minutes have been approved. Thank you. We're probably getting into maybe the longest part of our meeting, which will be a presentation by the Brendel Group on the status of the work that they're doing toward the resiliency plan that they're working with us. And this is going to be probably the first in a series of discussions we'll have with Brendel over the next few months as we're working toward our goal of March 31st of next year to have the final report and recommendations in place. That's a short timeline. So we've got, we did get a presentation from them back in May about the kickoff of the process, and we're now 2 months into it. So we're going to hear from them about where they stand and what the next steps are going to be and what are the issues we're going to need to consider in the coming months. So Andy, with that, I'll turn it over to you to introduce the folks at Brendel.
Sure. Well, I guess we'll go ahead and have Brendel folks introduce themselves. Let's go ahead and do that real quick.
Okay.
Judy, are you online? Or Becca?
Judy is not joining us today.
Okay,
this is Becca.
Okay, go ahead, Becca.
Yeah, I'm Becca Stock. I'm an engineer with Brendel Group, and I'm also the project manager for this project. So I'm sort of coordinating all the parts. I'm also leading up the inventory analysis as well as the scenario analysis. And today I am joined by Shelby. Shelby, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, I will. I'm using Becca's audio, so if it's looking a little funny, that's why. We're sharing the microphone. So hi, everyone. I'm Shelby Summer. I'm a senior planner with Brendel Group and a member of our leadership team. My role on the project is helping provide sort of the architecture for engagement process and strategy. And so we're joined with SOFIX Solutions and Tiffany's on today's call, as well as our climate justice workers, Jelly Duckworth, Justice Horn, and our brand new intern, Adalia Cabrales. So I'll pass it over to Stephanie to introduce herself next.
Thank you, Becca and Shelby, and thank you to the steering committee. My name is Stephanie Smith. I serve as managing partner of SOFIX Solutions. We're a change management firm. We help organizations navigate change through an equity lens, and we'll be guiding and supporting our engagement team in ensuring that we are taking an equitable look at this work. And so I'll pass it to Jelly so she can introduce herself.
Thank you, Stephanie, and thank you, steering committee. My name is Jelly. I am one of the climate justice workers, and I'll pass it to the next, which is Justice.
Thank you, Jelly. Thank you, steering committee. My name is Justice Horn. I use he/him pronouns. Also, the other climate justice worker. Also wanted to echo what Stephanie said, as well as Jelly. Our primary role is make sure that disenfranchised and underrepresented communities are well represented in this project, that their voices are being uplifted, amplified, and centered, because it'll be those communities that are hurt the worst when the climate crisis does hit. So it's on us to show up for our community and advocate for our community. Other than that, I appreciate the time to hold this space and appreciate y'all having us.
And we are excited to have Adalia, our newest team member. And so Adalia, if you'd like to join and introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Idalia. I'm the new intern for Brendel Group, and I'm excited to be here. I'm a student at UMKC, so I'm very excited to be here and to meet you all, even if it's through here. Thank you.
And we are excited to have you. So Becca, we'll toss it back to you.
Great, thanks, Tiffany. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. We have a short presentation for you today, but we also have plenty of time at the end for questions and discussion. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and then I'm going to have Laura kick us off a little bit.
All right, thank you, Becca, and thanks again, everyone. I'm so excited we could have so much of the team here to present today about our climate protection and resiliency plan. I'm just going to give you guys a bit of history real quick on this. Most of you are probably familiar, but Kansas City has had a climate protection plan since 2008. That climate protection plan was put together with assistance from the community and this climate protection steering committee. So it's been around a long time. It was one of the first major ones in the area back in its day. And because of efforts associated with that plan, we were able to reduce greenhouse gas emissions for city operations by 40% below year 2000 levels and reduce our community-wide emissions by 21% before the year 2020. However, we all know 2020 is past, and so the goals that we had set for ourselves needed to be updated. And you can go ahead and move to the next slide, Becca. So in comes resolution 200005. That's a lot of zeros. It's really easy to find that way if you're on the city clerk's page because of all the zeros. Just keep pushing zeros. But this particular resolution was put together with assistance from the community. They actually brought it to our office and said, this is what we'd like. And we thought that the emission reduction options were bold, but hopefully achievable and goals that we needed to strive for here in Kansas City. And that is a 30% overall reduction in community emissions by 2025, with the goal of being climate neutral in community-wide by 2040. And internally, just to walk the talk, we are hoping to have 100% reduction of emissions from electricity use by 2022 through some partnerships with Evergy. And then for municipal, we're expected to be climate neutral by 2030. So we've got quite a lift ahead of us, and it's one that we're really excited about. We do know that in order to do that, we're going to have to make changes on the utility scale and also in the building and transportation sectors. The point of this plan is to make sure that we do that in an equitable way without causing environmental harm to historically marginalized and climate vulnerable communities, which is why we're doing it the way we are. We also know that our original climate protection plan and just mitigating the climate issue, the time for that is long past. And we must now also become a resilient city and adapt to the climate issues that are facing us, and also find innovative ways to sequester carbon through both natural means and new technologies. So we are looking to do this new plan so that we can try to meld all of those things together. It is a messy process involving many, many, many stakeholders. For those of you that have read Resolution 05, there's a list, there's a paragraph. The longest thing in there is the amount of groups we have to reach out to and get input for on this plan, which is a big lift. I'm glad we have the team here that we have to make this happen. And so next slide, Shelby. Or I'm sorry, Becca's doing it. You're both sitting there in the office together. So here's our agenda today. Just a quick status of where the project is right now. And then we're going to give a lot of time to the outreach and engagement, because you can kind of see the overview of the plan from the previous steering committee video, if that is something you are interested in seeing. We're just going to give a little bit more information on where we are now and what we're hearing. And we're hoping that after we give you this presentation that you all will have some feedback and some ideas, and we can just open a really good dialogue on how to move this forward. With that, I'll turn it over to Becca.
Great. Thank you so much, Laura, for setting that stage. So as Laura mentioned, we did do a project overview for some of you last time we were here, acknowledging that there's a lot of people that are new. Some of these slides you may have seen before. We want to just kind of make sure everyone's on the same page and knows kind of where we're headed. And then, since we saw you last time, we've got 3 new team members on board, which is super exciting. And so we want to focus on that outreach and engagement, and really starting with the community and what they're experiencing, what their priorities are, and how we can leverage this climate action plan to not only meet those carbon reduction goals, but also help support the community, neighborhoods in your community. So we've set out some of these kind of key markers of this climate protection and resiliency plan. We want to build on existing data. As Laura mentioned, you guys have been doing climate action for many years. There's been great efforts both in the city and regionally that we want to pull from those efforts as much as possible and not duplicate the work. We want to gain a deeper understanding to the challenges that neighborhoods are facing. As Laura mentioned, climate change is here and we are feeling those effects, and we want to hear from those people in those neighborhoods what they're experiencing and how we can help support them the best to increase resiliency as well as continue to mitigate greenhouse gas emissions. And then we also want to make sure that this is a very actionable plan. So we want to make sure that we're reaching out to those community-based resources and advocacy groups that are already doing work in these communities and how we can support them to kind of amplify their impacts as well as support where there's some gaps. So with that in mind, this is sort of our big timeline for Kansas City. You have your 2008 plan, which came through 2020. So now we need to update it. So in 2021 and early 2022, we'll be working through the process of updating that plan, all pushing towards that 2040 goal of carbon neutral. And to do that, we have kind of a really basic framework here. We don't want to lose sight of that emissions reduction targets. That's still the most important thing. Is some people have mentioned a new IPCC report came out that we need to double down on our emissions reduction work to make sure that we're not overshooting that 1.5%, 1.5 degrees Celsius global warming. At the same time, we know that climate change is here and people are feeling the effects. So we want to make sure that the city is adapting to it and providing the resources for neighborhoods to be resilient to the effects that they're feeling. And then we're going to base this all on this equity and neighborhood-centered engagement. We really want to make sure that we're hearing voices that aren't typically heard in some of these climate action planning processes. And that's why we've hired Jelly and Justice and Adelia to really help us reach out to that community and make sure that we're hearing from everyone. And so with all those things put together, we'll have carbon neutral, equity-based, and resilient Kansas City at the end of this planning process. So I just have one more slide that I want to share on kind of where we're headed. And that's really on what we are seeing from the data. So we want to kind of do two things in this planning process. One is we've got all this great regional data that's telling us these are what your emissions are. This is what the mapping and the data are telling us around who might be feeling the most effects and what effects they might be feeling. We want to match that with what we're hearing in the neighborhoods and making sure that the data are telling us things that people are actually experiencing. So what the data tells us is that Kansas City is and will be feeling more severe heat events. We have had a couple of heat events this summer already, and we expect those to become more severe and more frequent. Flooding is also likely to become more severe and more frequent in Kansas City, which could be more of an issue in some neighborhoods than others. We also are looking at climate migration, and that's both from areas that may not be as habitable as they used to be due to flooding or other climate impacts, as well as the immigration of people from other climates that are being more severely impacted by climate change to Kansas City. We also want to acknowledge that air quality is an issue not only from transportation and other pollutants, but the severe heat events do exacerbate that problem. And finally, we expect vector-borne diseases to increase as well. As things are getting warmer, we're not getting those freezing events that kill off some of those insects. So we see more diseases like West Nile moving into places that they haven't been before. So our first phase is really kind of hearing from the community on what they're experiencing and trying to match it up with the data that we already have. So with that in mind, I really want to transition to hearing more about this engagement, and I'm going to pass it off to Stephanie to introduce that.
All right, thank you so much, to everyone. It has been a delight working with the Brendel Group and the city on this endeavor, with us being deeply rooted and committed to making sure that we are hearing the voices of all Kansas Cityans. And our commitment in this work has really been grounded in this being a human-centered, equity-driven approach, which means just by fact of that definition, that our willingness to monitor and adjust and to make sure that we're centering voices. And so before you are our guiding principles that really ground us as a team in doing this work. And many of you all, some of you all might recall that in our first presentation to you all, we put these same principles up. And so here we are again, and I'll ask a similar question and would love for those of you who are able to drop in the chat which of these principles really stand out to you as you think about your why, your commitment to climate justice, and then also our community and how we get there. If you could drop in the chat which ones stand out to you, and I'll pick out a few. As we move through this, you'll be able to hear the voices and the work of Jelly, Justice, and Adelia. Or Adelia's new, so she'll just be kind of going along with us. But Jelly and Justice in what they have been able to engage and how they've been able to engage. So I'm seeing the first one is maintaining hope in the midst of brutal facts. And this came up big time at our last time because we recognize already the impact. And Justice talked about it earlier in his greeting, where we know that many of our community members that are and many times facing the worst of this, very rarely have a voice in really helping to produce what some of the solutions can really be. So we're really excited, not only that we are committing ourselves as a city to this work, but we're saying we can't do this without the voices of our community members. And that kind of really goes back to reinforcing this with, not for. So this being willing to be uncomfortable, thank you for that. This being willing to be uncomfortable is a really important one because so often when we engage in conversations that have to do, especially with racial equity or inequity or any of the other isms that infect and affect our community, we find ourselves allowing the discomfort, the abnormalness of the conversation to prevent us, to stand in the way of us really being able to pursue justice. And so we'll ask you, even as you are participants and you are guiders of this work, we'll encourage you, as we have to encourage ourselves, to not allow discomfort to disrupt our commitment to this work. And I think David Warm talked about the difficulty sometimes in really being able to address and face what in many cases we may have been part of perpetuating. But the good news is that for most of us, when we know better, we do better. And so as we continue to move forward in this work and listen with our community members, we're really encouraged by how we'll be able to drive solutions that are not only equitable, but practical. We know that climate justice hits different community members in different ways. And so our commitment to this process being equitable gives us a chance. And so you all are like me and the rest of us that we know and think that all of them are important. And so I'm seeing being open to new information, also this attempt to change the narrative. Sometimes there can be narratives that certain communities don't care about climate, when the truth is climate justice and injustice affects all of us. And so of course we all care, right? We pay utilities, we're walking down streets, our children, we want them to breathe and be healthy, right? So all of this impacts us in different ways. And so there's narratives out there that absolutely affect how we interact with certain communities and what we even expect for certain communities to be a part of it. And so the team is here to really help to address that and mitigate that and to make sure that we are not only creating space, but having implementation of this plan with their voices. So with that, if we can move on to our next slide, I'll invite Jelly to tell us a little bit more about her work.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. Hi, everyone, again. As Justice and Stephanie and Becca so wonderfully articulated already, my role in this project is to make sure that the process and the outcomes are equitable. So a main foundation, and Justice, Nidalia, and the whole team. But one of the main things for that is to make sure we understand what our definition of equity is in this project. So as of right now, we have adopted Oakland's Equitable Climate Action Plan's definition of equity. And one of the reasons that we like this definition so much is that it ensures that we recognize and include the historical and systemic challenges that disproportionately impact historically marginalized communities, and as it relates to our long-term goal for climate justice, and climate justice really being the building of communities that are sustainable and self-sustaining. So we really see equity as the conduit to our long-term goal as to climate justice. And having a definition like this one not only holds us accountable for addressing climate change and ensuring that this planning process and the outcomes are practical and equitable, but it also helps us acknowledge the need to help heal communities in the process, which is another important part of the role for Justice and I as climate justice workers. So in this as well, we have to be intentional too about how we recognize historically marginalized communities in Kansas City. And one of the ways that we did that was by basing our information off of target areas leveraged by Mid-America Regional Council's great research on their risk and vulnerability assessment, and specifically some of our more specified research that Brindle Group did to show more updated vulnerabilities of communities in Kansas City. And so we used those maps to identify specific areas that were not only disproportionately impacted by climate issues, but also socioeconomic issues and other demographics as well. So when we identify at-risk communities, we want to be sure that we are including other intersections that they would face as well. So that is how we started to prioritize communities that we were going to start engaging with. And I do want to note, as Stephanie said, that this information is constantly evolving because we are making sure that community expertise is at the forefront of our conversations. So we are open to more interpretations in the process of this. So I'm going to the next slide. So I also want to make sure that we are intentional about explaining Justice and I's roles as climate justice workers, as facilitators and more of listeners and trust builders and relationship builders in this process with all of these groups that we are going to be engaging with, and to make sure that we're using our platform to bring community expertise and knowledge to the table. So as I mentioned earlier, although we prioritize historically marginalized communities because of disproportionate impacts on climate inequities, that does not mean that we're excluding all other communities in the process. So as you can see here, we are wanting to make sure that this plan has as much of a robust and experienced input as possible, so that it is holistic and can work long term. So we are starting with some of the neighborhood groups and also going to be working our way. As you know, you guys are a big part of the process as a steering committee. We are also including technical advisors, which includes city staff and primarily communities that service providers that interface regularly with the city as well, specifically on climate-related issues. And really the objective with working with all these groups, primarily in areas on greenhouse gas reduction, emission reduction, and resiliency and adaptation, is making sure that we are aligning those experiential community knowledge with the data that we have on climate justice issues. So, yeah.
Thank you, Jelly. I want to invite Justice to talk more about our metrics and give us an overview. Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you for Stephanie and Jelly. So sorry, I'm trying to. So kind of wanted to move forward on what exactly we're tracking in the process first and foremost would be the number of neighborhoods reached, the number of meetings in targeted areas. We are keeping track of that information through a drive that is shared by everyone in the organization, as well as in the number of hours of listening to community members as well, and the number of narratives received. I think it was exactly on point what Jelly stated. Personally, I have a lot of experience in the social justice space as well as Jelly, but we're not at all any experts. Our role in this project is to be facilitators for the community, is to further uplift, amplify, and bring them into this process. Personally, I think when the community has more hands on the project, if they feel that this project is their project, they're going to be more willing to get behind that. And that's hopefully what we plan to do. Kind of the next point of what we're doing with that information, it's important we're taking in information, but what exactly are we doing that, with it? We plan to facilitate conversations, and like I said before, listening, not lecturing, and really just being there to hear their voices, hear their personal experience, and really, if we can, make sure that they're a part of every single part of this project. Secondly, growing an understanding of the socioeconomic and cultural issues around climate. I know that a lot of us in this work look at the data points, but it's more important that we are actually listening to the real people, the real stories, and how this is actively affecting the average community member here in our community, and even today. Not trying to go off board, but I know Jelly brought it up in our meeting last week that a woman in South Kansas City was having issues of flooding, and that is today. And after talking to Jelly, she finally realized that it's related to the climate because of where her house sits, because of where the floodplains are, and where, I mean, she doesn't have money to just move out of that. So that is a climate issue, that is a socioeconomic issue, and it's a cultural issue that she's not able to get out of the neighborhood. Lastly, coupling climate-related information with other community challenges. And lastly, co-creating an actionable playbook that reflects community expertise. Really want to leave that last point with everyone. We very much want the community to feel that this is their plan, that this is their project, and that this is really something that they had a part to play in, because ultimately, this project, why we're all doing this work, is for our community. So it's important that we remember that. Next slide.
And thank you, Justice, for teeing that up, because when we talk about the importance of valuing the lived experiences of our community members and engaging each as having information about themselves and about their everyday community that can actually help to create and provide viable and practical solutions that move us closer to the justice. And so, you know, hopefully what you have heard shared from our team members really helps to solidify the importance of us ushering in a culture of accountability. That because this is ecosystem work, because this is cross-sector engagement, that it is important for us to really be able to have different engagement points and different ways that we are collecting not only quantitative data, but also qualitative methods of really getting into the contextual understanding. And so you'll see that all the voices that you have heard from today and names mentioned, and perhaps even those that haven't, especially our city staff, that is very much part of this team and have their fingerprints all over this. But we'll all be able to come together to go about this work and building this culture of accountability through the various ways that you see on your screen. And so we have since already begun our technical stakeholder interviews while we increase and amplify the voices of those with lived experiences. We want to partner that with the subject matter expertise that dwells within our cities and within our organizations. And so it's been really great connecting and listening and learning from our technical stakeholders as we continue to build out our outreach toolkit. And it had been mentioned earlier, but there has been great work that has already been in the making, right? That I have people who have already been championing and paving the way. Many of you are on this call with us today. And so we want to make sure that we are connecting the dots, that we are learning, and that we are able to share ourselves. And so the toolkit will continue to be an asset to us. And then we have collecting the ability to collect feedback through our KC Spirit playbook. This is an online engagement. And so we wanted to be able to have an online engagement while also recognizing that as we talk about cross-sector and cross-cultural issues or opportunities, we know that we also have a broadband access issue as well. And so making sure that we are not just stopping short, even in the midst of our current health crisis, that we are finding very meaningful and viable ways. Even if it takes us more time and more effort, we find it valuable. So you see that the online engagement does not supplant the one-on-one community conversations and engagements that our team will have already begun and will continue to engage in. And then, of course, we'll continue to track and analyze outcomes and share them back with you to help us in just reflecting and making sure, once again, that we're living in this culture of accountability. Justice mentioned it earlier, but I find it important to mention again the importance of coupling this climate-related information with other community challenges. We know that these things don't just happen in a vacuum, that in many cases, the lack of climate justice that exists within our neighborhoods perpetuates and sparks other incidents and vice versa. So we want to make sure that we are thinking holistically about this, as this is not just by itself. And so we'll continue to connect the dots in that way. So let's, Justice, can you come back and kind of walk us through phase one?
Yeah. So I think that's gonna, yeah, so kind of phase one, and that's what we're currently on, the listen and learn section from May to August 2021. And it's just going and asking just questions to the broader population on what climate change impacts are a greatest concern to you and your neighborhood, as well as how has climate change already impacted your health, home, and lifestyle. So we are doing that through stories submitted to us, through completing a survey, as well as adding to a map. I think it's also important for us to state that although this is the work we're doing, it's important for also everyone on the steering committee. We all have different networks. We all have different people that are in our lives, and it's important that we actively, with today's information, push out these links, push out this information and this website to our networks so that we are making sure we're reaching every part of our community.
And just real quick, Justice, thank you, Shelby. If you're able to check out your chat, if you click on that link and go ahead and allow it to open up, then once we get done with our time, we invite you to actually share, to join this conversation and share your story and provide your input on that, in addition to sharing it as Justice invited you to do so. Next slide. Thank you. Justice, anything that you want to pull out based upon what you've heard so far? I know that you and Jelly have been engaging in these conversations. And so do you have any particular highlight before you pass it to Jelly?
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and start with the first one. If the committee doesn't know much about me, a lot of my work comes from primarily the social justice space, as well as the Black space, to be frank with y'all. And listening to a lot of Black leadership, the Black community, as well as Black civil rights community and civic organizations, a lot of what their common interests are kind of near-term action. If you look at kind of those affected in the urban heat island, it is primarily our Black and brown communities that are feeling the heat. That is because of policy that was put in place that did not put in place sustainable and green housing, as well as access to cooling centers, as well as just how there's just no tree coverage because there aren't communities that are built, frankly, like the same ways some of our other neighborhoods are. So there was a greater emphasis for some near-term action, and that would look like planting trees, having trees in their neighborhoods, starting community gardens here in the coming months, as well as access to cooling centers. I think when you, just a metaphorical term and story that was used by a lot of our community members, you think of the elderly Black woman who may not have a family to take care of her, who may live in an apartment by herself. And for example, today and tomorrow, when it's high 90s, it is those people in our communities who are feeling that, as well as then you have our Black youth that is also not having the best air quality because of where they live. So that's kind of the biggest concern I have heard from my discussions with leadership in the Black community and East of Truce, and that is primarily how can we show up today for those communities today.
Thank you for sharing that, Justice. Yeah. I can speak on my side of things. This is why Justice and I make a great pair. He's have been engaged in the policy sector, and I have been in the grassroots environmental justice and social justice sector for about 6 years now. So I'm really looking at those intersections when talking to communities. And to that point, do want to make sure we note that sometimes talking to communities about climate change is not as direct as naming climate change. It is meeting the community where they are. So the story that Justice was referring to earlier, I do think it's worth mentioning in regards to this woman who was actually, her house actually was falling apart. The foundation was falling apart because it had so much wastewater that had flooded the basement and ended up like eating the foundation essentially. But when I started the conversation with her and another community member that was part of their neighborhood alliance, they told me that climate issues were not a pressing priority in their community at all. And so in order to engage in more conversation, to kind of meet in the middle, you just ask me, what is a priority? And it turned out that 5 out of the 6 things that they told me that was a priority ended up being climate related. And that was old infrastructure, which is a huge one that I've actually heard throughout with whether within institutions, nonprofits, or community members as well. That has been throughout the entire conversation, is poor infrastructure, as well as, like you said, flooding issues and transportation especially, that is not accessible where they are. And a couple neighborhoods out south where I talked to, they recognized that there were not even sidewalks at all, and no sidewalks in the neighborhoods, specifically in the Ruskin area is what I'm referring to. So we're recognizing that transportation is also a huge issue. On the flip side of that, there's also perspectives on the streetcar coming in and making sure that even though we are having sustainable transportation, we are also being considerate of long-term homeowners and the gentrification that is going alongside that. So those are also main priorities that we need to have input in when we are talking about climate solutions, like having sustainable infrastructure as well. So I've had an array of conversations, a lot on energy efficiency in buildings and homes. And to this last point here, I really want to touch, because we have one of those champions here, Kristen, if she's still on the line, with Bridging the Gap. They have a leak stoppers program that helps homes be more energy efficient as far as their water. And I don't want to misspeak because I don't know all the details, but I will let her know. But there are some really smart solutions that the community has already wanted and needs that are being in place. And another program that they just started over there is creating the urban forestry program, where they're starting to locate where trees need to be in communities so to help them to lower their energy costs. So there are great practical immediate solutions, like we were touched on earlier, that the community wants, that relate to some of the even long-term goals that we have as our group for energy efficient buildings down the line and infrastructure and things going forward.
I am still on the the line. So
Okay.
thank you for mentioning those programs.
Absolutely. Thank you for your work.
And Jelly, I would to jump in on just one more item. This is in doing a lot of listening to a lot of these community groups. I know there are a lot of our community groups who are well versed in issues that may not be sustainability related, but a lot of our civil rights organizations, our civic organizations and community organizations are well equipped and are well aware how climate issues are related to climate justice. So just really wanted to pose to the group that the fight for Black liberation, the fight for sustainable issues, the fight for queer liberation, so on and so forth, are interconnected. And a lot of people in this work are seeing that. That's why there's such an emphasis on not only sustainability, but more importantly, climate justice and what exactly that looks like.
Thank you, Justice, for lifting that up. And that really leads us to giving some more insight in the upcoming phases. And so, Jelly, if I can invite you back to really walk us through phases 2 through 4. I also want to share with you all my gratitude for taking time to listen to us. I will have to transition off to move to another meeting here right a little bit after 4. But the team will remain here to answer any questions. And of course, any way that I can answer those questions, the team will bring it back to me. But thank you all so much for your leadership and your time. So Jelly, I'm going to pass it to you.
Thank you, Stephanie, for being here and showing up as always. So with that, as we talked about the beginning phases, really having those one-on-one community conversations and more grassroots conversations are going to lead us into aligning those with some of our research and the data that we have, and making sure that we are bringing that input to start talking about the solutions that come up next. So in the phase 2, we really are trying to get at what specific climate solutions would the community like to see? So not just understanding and listening to their concerns that they are addressing right now, but what solutions, whether short-term or long-term, do you want to see? And specifically at a neighborhood, hyper-local level, because as we know, it varies sometimes neighborhood to neighborhood, block to block. So that data, that hyper-local data, is extremely important as we continue to move forward and start to brainstorm and explore what those solutions will look like, again, both short-term and long-term. And after we go through that phase, we really are trying to analyze, well, what can we do that will have the most impact moving forward based on all of this input that we're getting from the community, the stakeholders, and all of the groups that I recently showed that we're going to be talking to throughout this process. What's going to have the most impact, not only for the neighborhood, but for the surrounding businesses and organizations that are supporting those neighborhoods as well. So really prioritizing their priorities. And then the fourth phase is just my favorite one, is to mobilize. It's bring them together and actually start acting on these things. What can we implement? What makes the most sense for, again, not only community, and at this point, hoping that we really have a holistic overview of what the community actually wants, needs, and we're aligning our policy and solutions along with those. So, you want me to take this one to you, Becca?
I think Laura was gonna grab the final one here.
That's me. I was trying to get unmuted. Sorry, Jelly. All right, so thank you Climate Protection Steering Committee members for listening to us and seeing where we are right now. And now we're gonna have our ask of you all. So how can you engage? Obviously, you guys are our steering committee, and all of your input is important. But we'd also like to make sure, if you're not doing it already, that you are recognizing climate change and the climate crisis for what it is, and asking others to do the same, and of course taking action within your own organizations, and taking action at the political level to help move this forward. Like I said in the beginning, we know the big things we're going to have to change: utility scale, energy, transportation, building envelopes. We understand all of those things. So, but we need your help to make sure that these move forward politically so that we can make the big changes in this plan. The other thing we really want for you all is to help spread the word about the engagement website that's out here. And we love that people are taking the climate survey. As many people as can take the survey as possible would be great, but also share your climate story. If you know somebody that's got a great climate story, either a success or even a way the city might have failed them, we would love to hear those stories. The more stories that are on that engagement website, the more people will read them and they'll go, oh, wait, I didn't think that was related to climate. Wow, I can totally share my story. So more stories lead to more stories, lead to more stories, lead to more public input, which is really, really what we need. We also have a map on the engagement site that you can add areas where you think we've made climate successes and areas that may have been failures. And that can be just from we're tearing down natural resources, or we built a park, or Mike Kelly was able to get a really cool new bike trail through an area. So make sure you note those on the map so we can start to see a big picture of where Kansas City is excelling and where we are not. And then below we have upcoming events. These are a few events that we're looking to try to reach out to people at. With COVID, of course, we never know exactly how that's going to go, but we're working hard to try to be at these events. And we would love other suggestions of upcoming events where we can have a moment, not like a loud concert, but we could actually sit and have a moment to talk with any of the attendees about climate change issues. So if you have something coming up that you think would be of value for us to share just a little time, or if you know of a specific organization that's really looking for some kind of climate presentation, we will try and make that happen. And on that note, I think the plan was to turn it over to you all for your questions and comments, but I wanted to make sure because, all right, sounds like we're in a good place. So thanks again, everyone.
Perfect. Thanks, Laura. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing so we can all see each other as best we can, and open it up to questions from you all about the presentation or thoughts you have moving forward or anything like that.
This is Michael Kelly. First off, thank you again for the presentation. Question that I had is, would you explained in the equitable engagement overview that one of your focuses would be on the number of people you reach in targeted areas. Can you give me a bit of an explanation on what you are defining as targeted areas?
Sure,
Yeah.
I can speak. Oh,
Great. Go ahead, Jelly.
Yeah, I was like, I can speak on that. It was kind of hard to see because we didn't actually have the map ups today. I thought we were going to have some of the map ups today, but I'm sure we'll be happy to share those with you. So there was research done by Mid-America Regional Council and more specified research done by Brindle Group that really assessed where communities were going to be most at risk and vulnerable. And then the components of that were not only climate related issues, but also socioeconomic and demographic. So we're looking at, specifically one of the areas I remember in the map that was really prone to heat was up in Northeast. And east side over there. So that's specifically a really high dense, as you well know, immigrant population and Black African American population over there. So that's what we're referring to. So those maps really show us taking those three components of demographic, socioeconomic disparities, and climate inequities, coupling all of that and then showing us who's most at risk. So we're really trying to prioritize conversations with them first. I hope that answered your question.
Thanks, Jelly. I see Robin with your hand up.
Okay. Shoot, sorry, I was having trouble unmuting. Yes, thanks so much for the presentation and for the great work you're doing. My question is about the prioritization, and I'm just wondering if you could tell us more about what does that look like? Is there a certain framework you're using, or how will solutions be prioritized in this plan?
Yeah, absolutely. I can take a first crack at it, and then if anyone else wants to add. So from my kind of analysis perspective, as Laura alluded to, there are certain things we have to do to hit these carbon neutral goals. And so we have a little bit like improving energy efficiency in buildings. We know that's going to be one of the big buckets. But then what we really want to do is look at what the community members are telling us from that kind of bottom-up approach and saying, okay, what's the best way to do that? Because we know if we have the community support, we're going to get more implementation and more action and more actual results. So it will really be a marrying of that top-down analysis, leveraging the regional work that's been done around the strategies that will have the biggest impact in your area with what we're hearing from communities about what they need. So there'll be a little bit of that kind of math meets qualitative stories. Does that answer your question?
I think so. I'm also just trying to understand the steering committee's role in that process, and whether there's going to be opportunities for the committee to discuss the different, solutions and alternatives.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's not to answer your question with a question, but we do have 2 more meetings scheduled with you all. And so our current thinking about that is we'll have one kind of at the end of phase 1, beginning of phase 2, which is here's what we've heard from our communities. What strategies do you think we should start looking at? Kind of into that brainstorming phase 2. And then we'll come back kind of into that beginning of phase 3 and say, okay, here's all the strategies that we have. Where do you think we should put our effort? Where do you think we can have the biggest bang for our buck? Really leveraging you guys as some of our technical experts and making sure that we're getting your input in there on where we think we can have the biggest impact. So we will have 2 more meetings. If you guys have input about shifting the timing of those meetings, we're open to suggestions there.
And Becca, if I might also, Robin, just one of our roles for the city is to help work with the Climate Protection Steering Committee. You're certainly not going to be focused or forced into just 2 more meetings to hear what the climate or the consultants have to say. I think one of the things we need to hear from the committee is, what is your frequency? What are you guys wanting to do? And then leave it to myself and my staff to figure out what under the contract with Brendel we can accommodate. And we have some flexibility with our funding. We can make things happen where we need to. So I don't want it to sound like we're trying to be so rigid that this is what you're going to get with Brendel and that's it. It's my role and Laura's role to make sure we steer your needs, your wants from the steering committee with what we can do under a contract with Brendel.
Thanks, Andy.
All right.
I think just to follow up on that, that was my sense as well, that obviously the Brendel needs to meet with us twice more at least to present their findings and at the different stages and phases as they complete. But we may, as a steering committee, may want to have our own meetings to evaluate what we've been presented separately and give time for us to have that evaluation and consideration of those issues. And so, we've got a section on the agenda today with the little time we have left today to try and talk about meeting frequency and meeting topics. But Becca, while we have you all and your team on the phone, first of all, by the way, thank you very much. It was an excellent presentation. Sorry I didn't say that earlier. But while we have you on, can you tell us, in terms of scheduling and a final deliverable to City Council on March 31st, working back from that, strangely as it sounds, that's only 7 months from now, and you have a lot on your plate.
Yeah.
Yes. What would you foresee as a schedule for meeting with us and having those next couple meetings in order to give yourselves enough time to present to us a draft final product that we can then review before going to City Council?
Yeah, so the way we have it drafted out right now is thinking about meeting with you all again in September, sort of end of phase 1, beginning of phase 2, and then another time in November, which would be kind of between 2 and 3. But again, as Andy mentioned, that's all flexible depending on where you guys want your input. And then obviously there'd be the draft plan for your review and comment likely in January.
In January, okay.
And also, I wanted to mention, they are, and Becca said this earlier on, they are working through municipal and community-wide greenhouse gas inventories and a community vulnerability and risk assessment for us as well right now. And those two plans are not completely, those two pieces are not finished yet. And once they're finalized, that'll give you all something else to look at to help make decisions.
Right. Yeah, so we'll be leveraging that data that Laura just mentioned as we go into phase 2, saying, you know, this is what we're hearing from the community, this is what the data are telling us, what things can we match up there as far as strategies go.
Okay, well, it sounds like at a minimum, we should try and have you back in about a month from now, sometime in September. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's what we've kind of got on our plate right now. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
All right.
Beth had her hand raised for a while.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, Jelly.
Hi, I want to echo everyone who has spoken so far. Thank you so much for that great presentation. You all are doing really great work, and I'm really excited to see that this work is informing the plan. I have a couple of questions about some data points. A couple of things in your presentation that really resonated with me was, one, meeting people where they are, and two, you know, talking about these issues in the form of issues that they are experiencing. So everybody on this meeting probably knows that Kansas City is one of the tops the list of cities to experience climate change. We also have a really serious affordable housing crisis in the city. I think we're also at the top of the list of decreasing affordable housing. So I'm wondering if evictions are a part of this lens. And my secondary question would be if utility shutoffs are also a part of this lens in organizing work. You know, I've talked to folks who are getting their utility shut off in 93-degree weather when the hot weather rule starts at 95 degrees. And so that to me is a huge equity problem. And when the utility shutoff data isn't quite as clear, that would require a little bit of a heavier lift with our Public Service Commission. But I really do think it is incumbent upon us, if we are going to be tracking how folks are accessing energy in our city, to really understand who is the most severely impacted by utility shutoffs in terms of where we are prioritizing our energy efficiency programs.
I want to say I think that's a great point, and it's definitely something that we should consider, especially as we hear that from our community members. I wonder if Jelly or Justice would like to comment on if they're hearing that from folks in the communities.
Yeah, I think it's a phenomenal point. I think when talking about those who are greatly affected by this, it is those who are already suffering the most from external forces already, and for other forces to step in and also cause them great suffering. I think this is without a doubt needs to be added. I think we'll obviously talk about this, but you all are a steering committee, and if this is where you think we need to scare, then so be it. I'm fine with that. So I appreciate you bringing that up. Casey tenants and the fight for low housing and the tenants' right is without a doubt. They need to have a seat at the table. They need to be further uplifted, and they need to, because it's all related. So I appreciate it.
And I think it also further goes with what Jelly said a little bit about infrastructure and energy efficient homes, because if you have a home that's not energy efficient, you're more likely to spend more on your utility bills and therefore get behind on your bills, et cetera, et cetera. So absolutely.
So if I'd like to jump in to second what Beth was saying and add that there are administrative and blocks and a lack of flow of information that are causing funds that are intended to relieve people from their utility bills to not get spent, both in the water department and in the electric utility, and possibly in the natural gas utility too. I don't know. But we've been working with Elizabeth Danforth at Evergy for some weeks on this, and we haven't gotten to the bottom of it yet. So that's part of the funds that are intended, and there's a couple $1 million at least, are not getting into the right hands.
Thanks, Kristen. I think we have time for maybe one more question from the committee before we let Brendel go. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
My question is, and it's largely directed at Andy. I know that one of the reasons that we've had trouble with the 2008 climate protection plan is we simply haven't had the funds to do what that 2008 plan set out for us to do. So for example, the 2008 plan had 150,000 trees as one of the goals. And there was no funding to follow up to make sure that those trees were there. And we know that's going to be a big issue for us with whatever we decide to do with climate protection. Andy, what is your sense of the potential flow of funds from federal funds that might help us in this venture? And what would the timing of those federal funds be? Because I'd like to be ready with a bucket to catch them as soon as they start flowing through the pipeline.
Yeah, so we've been monitoring, of course, the infrastructure bills and all that. The city manager has asked all of us directors to kind of keep a list of those wish list, those infrastructure projects ready to go, shovel ready type of projects. So we've got an active list that department directors have been adding to. Of course, just recently the Senate just of course passed, their version of the bill and needs to go over to the House now. Some of my contacts with other directors around the country have been actively watching, particularly the green infrastructure side of things, the trees, whether it's planting or maintenance. So there's been a lot of campaigning behind the scenes and a lot of lobbying behind the scenes on trying to get dollars kind of funneled into that area. And those dollars, of course, would be kind of funneled into different departments within the federal organization. So still looking pretty good. It's, there were some cuts here and there, but it's certainly not final, particularly since it still needs to go to the House. So from the federal level, we're still hopeful we'll get something. One of the things that when you started that question, I did want to kind of bring to the whole steering committee that this reminded me about this whole process is that when we started out in this process and in this particular contract with Brendel, we were very specific. One thing that we wanted to be different about this process than the 2008 plan is to make sure that the strategies that we come out of this for both the community as well as the city operations is more focused, more specific, and hopefully Brendel will help us identify those types of funding mechanisms and opportunities that will kind of help us implement some of those strategies. So rather than having a huge menu of options and strategies, hopefully we'll have something that's more focused that our modeling shows that will help us reach our goals, but it kind of helps us focus our staff time as well as knowing where we can go with the funding sources for it. So that's in our contract with Brendel. It was something we were very specific to put into that to kind of help us focus on that funding issue.
So, and I would like to just shore up what Andy just said by adding, for Brendel's sake, that it seems clear to us that the city itself, municipal funds are not going to be sufficient to do what needs to be done for preparedness, and therefore engagement of private funding needs to be an important strategy in our overall climate plan, and that's not an easy ask, but I think it has to be part of it.
Yeah, thank you both. I would agree 100% with what you've said. It's going to be not a small lift to hit your goals, and we're going to need to pull from all the resources that we can find to do it.
Very good. Okay, well, Becca and the rest of the Brendel team, thank you again very much. It was extremely informative, and we appreciate all your hard work and wish you luck as you go back out and continue over the next month or so. We'll look forward to seeing you in about a month.
Sounds good. We'll see you guys soon.
Thanks so much.
Bye.
Okay. So next on the agenda, I just wanted to talk briefly about scheduling future meetings and future topics for future meetings. It seems to me that over the next few months, we really probably will have to be laser focused on the development of the plan and prioritizing and funding and all these other ideas that we've been talking about. So I don't want to overlook the possibility of adding other topics to it. I am a little concerned that our plates are going to be pretty full, just at least in the next 2 to 3 months with getting this plan to take shape. But that said, we typically haven't met as a committee on a monthly basis, but I think over the next few months, maybe the next 3 months, we probably ought to plan for monthly. Andy, I'd like to hear what you and your staff think about that, but it strikes me that September, November, and December are probably at a minimum times we ought to meet.
Yes, certainly. So the ordinance for the Climate Protection Steering Committee only required four meetings per year. So that was sort of after the 08 plan went into effect. The ordinance basically said that the committee could stay on to continue on the implementation side. So of course, this is a new planning process. So of course, we are very active at this moment. Certainly amenable to monthly or whatever. We may not, again, if you want Brendel at the table, again, it's going to be a matter of us finding out how much time we need of them for funding purposes to modify our contract accordingly. Or is there situations where I can have Laura and the team, my staff do the update for you so that we're not necessarily using contract dollars to do that. But I'm certainly open for monthly meetings. I'm more, we can certainly pick a day, and do it the same day of the month. Or if folks like the process we use just on this particular meeting, where we basically did a poll and had 5 or 6 days available of the month that we let people vote on, and then we kind of went with the one that had the most votes. We could do it that way. I'm certainly open for whatever the committee wants to do.
I won't speak for the committee, speak for myself. I thought the polling idea was a good idea, and it seemed to generate good input and good turnout. And unless anybody has a disagreement with that, I'd vote for that approach again, just to select a date.
Tom, Bridget has her hand up. I don't know if you can see that.
I can't. Oh, there she is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, Bridget.
Sorry, and I also have to have my camera off because my internet is choosing violence today.
Okay.
But yes, I definitely agree with the idea of maybe, the Laura and Andy and everybody kind of filling, like giving us an update, and we have a meeting so we don't have to extend the contract and spend money on that, because as we know, we're going to be putting a lot of money into this plan. And so I'm very willing to meet monthly, but I don't think that we possibly need the Brendel group each time. So that's just my 2 cents.
This is Bill. I would definitely want a September meeting. I think we have other things on our plate, and I would probably like to see staff update us on Brendel group, unless there's something very compelling where we need them to fill in at that point. And I imagine, echoing Tom, we probably need an October, November meeting, but I don't want to get too far ahead of my skis.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, and for purposes of setting that meeting up, it takes us probably about a 2-week time period administratively to, get the agenda set up, to do the polling, to do the agenda, to get the notice to the clerk's office and get it all posted. So if you are interested in doing a September meeting, then I can certainly get started on at least getting that scheduled and get the polling going. And then that would allow Tom to work with the rest of the committee members. You guys can start thinking about what you'd like on the agenda, so that we use that hour and a half, if that's sufficient time, to the best of our best use of the time.
Does anybody think we shouldn't have a meeting in September?
I think we've got a lot of work to do, so I think monthly is appropriate.
Okay, and I would also
agree
say,
as well.
If there's any specific information that you folks need, certainly reach out to me. I'm your liaison to the steering committee, to the office. So certainly reach out if there's background information, documents, whatever you think you need. You just send me a note, and or Rachel would be the other person. We'll get back what you need so that you can kind of do your homework, if you want to call it that.
Okay. Well, Andy, it sounds like Brendel will have something they want to present to us in September. Whether they can do that through staff or whether they feel the need to do that themselves, I suppose we can talk about that maybe as we get closer.
Sure.
It sounds like the committee is amenable to just having staff present if that's necessary, or if that's feasible, and withholding some of those later dollars. to be used later if necessary, right?
Okay.
Okay.
So what I'm hearing you say is that you're okay with delaying Brendel's September meeting, possibly till October, and just have a meeting with staff in September?
I'd say subject to your recommendation, to the staff's recommendation. If they think Brendel really needs to be there to hear what we have to say and take our input, then maybe.
Okay. So let Laura and I work with Brendel. We'll talk to them in the next week or two. We're going to do a debriefing after this as well, but we'll see how it goes in the next week or two, and we'll pose that question directly to Brendel if they think September is just it's the opportune time for them to bring back what they need to the steering committee. If they're saying that it's fine, we could push them back a month, we'll do that.
Okay.
All right.
Tom, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Been newbie on the committee here. If we have agenda items or possible agenda items or possible speakers or anything like that, does that go directly to Andy to set that up as far as part of the agenda, or how does that actually work?
That's a great question. Andy, you may have more insight into that than I do. I have an idea of what I would suggest, but I'll let Andy talk about what we've done in the past.
Well, I'm completely fine. I would normally put the agenda together with the chair. So I usually leave it to the chair to reach out to the committee members and kind of gather their input, so that more or less I have one contact, and with the chair particularly. So whether it's the EMC or the steering committee, that's typically who I'm working directly with. So my suggestion is let you, Tom, poll the committee members to see what agenda items you would like.
Yeah, and I would appreciate probably 10 days notice on a meeting to, a call for agenda items, just to give everyone a chance to get something in and give staff time to, if it's needed there, just everyone has time on that if possible.
That's a good suggestion. I want to ask, did folks receive my email that I circulated with the draft agenda for this meeting a couple weeks ago? Did anybody not get that? Because I think that's I think that's the best way to handle it, Bill. I agree with you. I think if I can circulate a draft or just, an email asking for input, that would be the best way to handle it. And then I can communicate that with Andy.
I did get a draft, but it was from Rachel. I know my email address was wrong initially, so I don't know who can make sure that my address has been updated in whatever records are being kept.
Okay.
Should have been taken care of, Angela.
Okay.
Thanks, Angela. Okay.
If I can real quick, one of the city attorneys is on. Eluard, if you're listening in, I wanted to ask a question. I hate to put you on the spot. So Eluard, are you with us? Well, the reason I was asking, one thing that I would caution the steering committee about is meeting outside the form of this public notice that we did with this particular meeting. So Eluard would usually give us some type of guidance to the steering committee in terms of how many of you should be meeting and without a public notice. So there might be some guidance we'll forward to you to just kind of be aware of that, so that we're following all the sunshine law requirements. Okay. So I just want to make sure. I'm not an attorney. I'm not the city attorney. I'm not going to say what they are, but I'll defer to Eluard to kind of send that out electronically.
That'd be very helpful. Thanks, Andy.
All right.
Anything else on future meetings, or otherwise, I know we're a little bit over time, but I did have public comments on the agenda here, and there may be members of the public who have something to say. Before we do that, I just want to make sure we've covered the idea of future meetings. Okay, is there anybody still in the meeting from the public that has any comments or statements they want to make? Going once, going twice.
I'll say something just to shoot my mouth off here a little bit. Just just a reminder, and I'm sure each and every one of us know this, but just to reaffirm it, that our climate crisis and our ecological crisis are existential threats. So, it's it's becoming more and more obvious that it's becoming a whole lot more serious. So just reaffirming that this not a game, and it's serious.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Just to put a light note on
it. Thank you. Billy, do you have your hand? Billy Davies, your hand?
Yes, thank you so much, Mr. Griever. Thank you, members of the committee. Congratulations to all new members on your appointment, and just thank you all for your work. Again, I'm trying to, I guess, just want to say that as has been mentioned, the IPCC report being released yesterday, and along with another dire warning, and I think we're just finally coming out this week after umpteen days of air quality warnings related to for Kansas City, but related to wildfires out in the West. It's I think we all understand like the seriousness of the moment we face, but I think one of the things that the report meant to reveal, I think, is that while humans are such a driving force with the climate crisis, it also means that there's a lot of power vested in humanity and in leaders such as yourselves to help right the ship so that we can lead folks into a healthier, more resilient future. Commend you on that, and we look forward to working with you. Thank you all again so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Davies. Anybody else? Don Wallace. I see your hand.
Yeah, thank you. I just threw my question into the chat, and just want to make sure you highlight or take a little bit of time to take a look at it. But my encouragement is to consider, I think, what the Environmental Management Commission meeting is going to be about tomorrow, or look at tomorrow, is the possibility of an ecological emergency declaration. I think that's something your committee might want to consider following up on as well. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate the comment.
Yeah, I might just kind of do a tie-in, a little prelude to that. So tomorrow's the Environmental Management Commission, and that is on the agenda. There will be kind of an update to the climate plan for the commission as well. Just myself kind of going over a few points, so it's going to be fairly brief. But there is a more direct conversation about the declaration and what other cities are doing around the country. So, is this something that the commission will take on themselves, or will they partner with the Climate Protection Steering Committee, or would they defer this to the Climate Protection Steering Committee? So this is all something that we'll see how the conversation goes, and I'll kind of carry that to this particular committee for consideration, probably at the next meeting. There is also some conversation about where we go in September. So another agenda item might be, we're getting to the point where we might need to do an update for council, and we could do that somewhere in a business session. So if we do that in September, somehow is there a tie-in to any type of a declaration or something along those lines? So I'm just kind of, there's some overlapping work going on here between your commission and the steering committee. Just wanted you to be aware of that.
Very good. Okay, I don't see anybody. There we go. One more. Jeremy Knoll, excuse me.
Sorry, I'm trying to get unmuted. I did just want to note that there is the regional climate action planning effort happening right now as well. And I didn't hear it discussed almost at all through this conversation. I just want to make sure that those dots are being connected, that there's some kind of collaboration happening between these kind of scales of climate planning.
Yeah, Jeremy, and I completely left that off. That was part of maybe some strategy that we need to talk about, where we can maybe do a presentation to council for the regional plan, and then follow up with a discussion about where we are with our city-specific plan. So thank you for chiming in. I meant to throw that in there when I was thinking about this meeting, and that one slipped out, but that's, sure. I think, certainly up for a possible business session in September, if not early October.
Got it. There are a number of people on here that are involved in one way or the other with that regional plan. So yeah, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to help connect however we need to make sure that those aren't happening separately.
Well, and the other thing is a big issue, now that you kind of open the door on that, is the energy code issue as well. So just a lot of folks are asking about where we are with the 21 code. So council is aware of what we're doing with the climate protection plan, how we want to kind of start the conversation with the community and our stakeholders on the 21 energy code. See how far we can get, see what the strategy is going forward. And if necessary, it may have to go to further stakeholder meetings through city planning, but city planning is at this point wanting to defer with the climate protection planning process and see where that goes. So just want to make sure people are aware that the energy code from the city perspective, we're not ignoring it. We know that this is a big one, but we want to kind of funnel this through the climate protection planning process first, see how far we can get, if we can come to some resolutions on that or some agreements. And if not, then it'll go back to city planning for further discussions.
Okay.
I would suggest that would be a good topic for our next meeting.
Okay.
And there's a lot you could do to set it up so that the moment the climate action plan comes out, you've got it locked and loaded and done and ready, and it's a win on day one. So I would discourage you from waiting until a climate action plan is done in 2022 to start talking about adopting a 2021 energy code. Now's the time. Be bold.
Excellent. Thank you, Jeremy. Okay, well, we are very close to, we're over time. Is there anything else from any member of the committee before we adjourn for the day? Hearing none, I'd say we can wrap it up and look forward to meeting in September.
Thank you, everyone.
Stay tuned for further information on all of that on the agenda and the planning. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, all.